is back with us in Washington, and also with us tonight again is political scientist at Princeton, Wright. Alex, Republicans are responding to the arguments laid out by Trump's team. What are they saying?
They are not happy. I would not be surprised if there are phone calls flying back and forth right now between senators and the Trump defense team. If the Trump team in Mar-a-Lago is calling them as well, they overall did not feel like they did a thorough job. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who has typically been a Trump supporter, saying that deciding to vote to support the constitutionality of this process. Listen to what he said.
I said I'd be an impartial juror. Anyone listening to those arguments, the House managers were focused, they were organized, they relied upon both precedent, the Constitution, and legal scholars. They made a compelling argument. President Trump's team were disorganized. They did everything they could but to talk about the question at hand. And when they talked about it, they kind of glided over it, almost as if they were embarrassed of their arguments.
Congressman Mike Johnson, he's one of the more prominent Republicans in Louisiana. Chance has told one of my colleagues on the Hill that he is already getting calls with pushback from what Cassidy said. It'll be interesting to see what kind of fallout happens from this vote for Cassidy. But frankly, he is not the only one that is mad about this. I'm just going to read to you a couple other things. Cruz said that the lawyers didn't do an effective job and called lead impeachment manager Raskin impressive. Lisa Murkowski, a Republican from Alaska, called Castor's segment a missed opportunity. Senator Susan Collins said she was perplexed that his team didn't make any arguments at all. And even Senator Rubio said that he doesn't want to be too tough on Castor because he only had a week, but said that he didn't do as good of a job as the second gentleman that presented the arguments.
Wow. I mean, many of those names, including Cassidy, they're not never Trumpers, but they seem to be given their, real opinion today. So, Lauren, you're an expert in political science. This is a political process with legal implications. What do you make of that slippery slope argument from Republicans that any past president can be retroactively, legally, canceled?
Well, to be clear, Democrats have a slippery slope argument, too, and they're essentially saying if we let a former president get away with this, then just imagine what future presidents will do. But you're right, the Republican core argument does seem to be a slippery slope. I frankly think it's pretty insulting to the millions of civil servants who could not have dreamed of behaving so recklessly during their time in office. But in addition to that, the Trump's defense attorney showed a video of Democrats claiming from the very beginning of the administration in 2017 that the president should be impeached. That actually shows how high the bar to impeachment is. Nancy Pelosi held off that caucus that wanted to impeach the president. They waited until 2019. And so the point is, you can't simply argue the president should be impeached and that makes the process start or get going somehow. There's a very high bar for crimes and misdemeanors, and it took the president asking a foreign leader to get involved in an election for the Democrats to be forced to take this up in 2019.
Well, Lauren, the Trump team, they took a bashing, from fellow Republicans, and on Twitter, they were going nuts today. So let me ask you if there's anything good in here. We've seen in recent years, President Trump, case in point, that observing norms is not always rewarded. Could it help to see the Trump team zag where everyone would expect them to zig?
I think the zagging was pretty ineffective. And Castor actually said at one point, we changed our strategy because we thought the impeachment managers did a pretty good job. And that's not exactly where you want to be. Senator Cassidy, I think, hit the point on the head when he said, where's the argument that this president did not incite an insurrection? I know it was a constitutional day, but you would at least have expected that to come up as a core argument. And I'll just add briefly, from the perspective of an academic, there are so many conservative legal scholars that are excellent at what they do, that know the Constitution by heart. They don't have it marked up with sticky notes. They don't really, they're not disorganized. And there are many of those people in the academic community. It just appears that the president was not able to enlist their support or advice because even these arguments today were very weak from people who are frankly not constitutional experts.
Alex, on the other side today, House impeachment managers, they opened with this graphic, I think it was like 10-minute video of that siege. I would imagine if you had been in there that day and you felt like one of the targets, I mean, PTSD could be a real thing. And if not that, you still feel traumatized in some ways, I would guess. What was the mood in the room like?
Right when that was happening, Chance, apparently, according to my colleagues that were inside, it was extremely quiet. You could hear the cries and screams from the video. They said ricocheting off the wall, some of the members turning away during some of the more graphic points in the video, like when that police officer shot Ashley Babbitt. So it was an extremely emotional start to the day. It changed a bit throughout the day as lead impeachment manager Raskin appealed to to the senators when he got a little bit emotional. Some of the senators looked up from their notes, and then later in the day they got tired, which I think is why they did not go forward with that rebuttal. They felt like they said everything they needed to, and that the Trump defense team really did themselves in on this one.
And real quick, Lauren, I think we only have about 30 seconds here. What does today's proceedings tell you about where we're going?
That it's a partisan process. And so I know we're talking about the strength of arguments and how powerful some of the stories were, and the precedent argument from Joe Neguse and Congressman Raskin. But really, I think what we saw today is this will break down along party lines. The president will probably not be convicted. And so despite how bad his lawyers are or how good the impeachment managers were, I think we know that the outcome here will probably be predictable.
Alex Miller in Washington, Dr. Lauren Wright in New Jersey. Thank you both.